The Zoosh were our friends. The Zoosh had always been kind. They were tall, insect-like beings with smooth chitinous shells and sharp, intelligent eyes. Their voices were soft, clicking in a way that was almost musical. They had been one of the first alien species to welcome humanity into the stars, offering trade, friendship, and knowledge. For decades, the Terran Republic and the Zoosh lived in peace. Human traders often traveled to Zoosh space, exchanging technology and resources. The Zoosh, in return, provided their expertise in bioengineering and medicine, helping humans survive in deep space. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and mutual growth. But then, something changed. At first, it was small things. Trade convoys reported unusual delays at Zoosh customs stations. Their messages took longer to receive replies. Some merchants spoke of Zoosh officials acting differently, less patient, more distant. Then, entire ships began to vanish. The first signs of trouble. Captain Elias Carter sat in his command chair aboard the TSV Pathfinder, a mid-sized exploration vessel assigned to the Outer Territories. His crew had been ordered to check on missing trade ships that had last reported near Zoosh space. "This doesn't make sense," his navigator, Lieutenant Vera Kim, muttered, scanning the star charts. These were safe routes. The Zoosh never had problems before. Elias nodded. And now 5 ships are gone without a trace. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the empty void on the screen. The Zoosh were many things, but they were not aggressive. They had no history of war, no history of sudden hostility. And yet, something was wrong. The Pathfinder approached the last known location of a missing freighter, the SS Horizon, a civilian transport ship. The moment they arrived, the ship's sensors picked up something unusual. Debris floating in space, charred metal drifting silently in the black void. Carter's heart sank. "Send a probe," he ordered. A small drone launched from the Pathfinder, scanning the wreckage. The readings came back quickly. It was what they feared. The horizon had been destroyed. "Radiation signatures confirm energy weapon impacts," Kim reported. She hesitated. "Sir, these readings match Zoosh plasma cannons." Silence filled the bridge. Elias leaned forward, staring at the data. "That's impossible," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. The Zoosh didn't attack humans. They had no reason to. And yet the evidence was there, floating in the emptiness of space. The message that changed everything. As the crew processed the shocking discovery, a new alert flashed on their consoles. A distress beacon, weak but active, coming from a lifepod nearby. "Bring it aboard," Carter commanded. The small escape pod was pulled into the ship's hangar. The crew rushed to open it. Inside, barely conscious, was a man, a human, dressed in the uniform of the SS Horizon. His face was pale, his breathing weak. He had been in the pod for days. "Get him to medbay," Carter barked. The man needed help, but more importantly, he had answers. Hours later, the survivor, identified as Engineer Darrell Ross, was stable enough to speak. His voice was hoarse, his eyes filled with something between fear and confusion. They weren't the same," he whispered. Carter frowned. "Who?" "The Zoosh," Ross said, his hand shaking. "They attacked us without warning. No communication, no demands. They just opened fire." He swallowed hard. But that's not the worst part. Carter felt a chill run down his spine. "What is?" Ross looked at him, and for a moment, it seemed like he wasn't sure if he should say it. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. Their eyes were different. Carter stared. "What do you mean?" Ross's breathing quickened. "Zoosh eyes. They're bright, full of life. But the ones who attacked us, their eyes were dark, hollow, like they weren't even alive anymore." He shuddered, like they weren't Zoosh at all. A sudden warning. Before Carter could process what he had just heard, Alarms blared across the ship. The Pathfinder sensors had picked up something. Multiple ships entering the system. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim's voice was tense. "Zoosh warships, heading straight for us." Carter's pulse quickened. "Are they hailing us?" Kim shook her head. "No." A cold feeling settled in Carter's stomach. The Zoosh had never ignored human transmissions before. And now, they were coming in at attack speed. "Shields up," Carter ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The view screen flickered, and the Pathfinder's long-range cameras zoomed in on the approaching Zoosh fleet. Carter had seen Zoosh ships before. They were elegant, curved, and sleek, built for travel rather than war. But these were different. The hulls were darker, almost twisted. Strange, glowing patterns pulsed across the surface, and as the ships got closer, Carter finally saw what Ross had described. The Zoosh pilots stared back at them through their bridge windows. Their eyes were empty, lifeless. Wrong. Carter felt his hands clench into fists. Whatever had happened to the Zoosh, one thing was clear. They weren't humanity's friends anymore. The first contact gone wrong. The Zoosh warships closed in fast. The TSV Pathfinder had its shields up, weapons armed, but Captain Elias Carter hesitated. The Zoosh had been allies for decades. Was this just a misunderstanding? "Send a distress signal to Terran Command," Carter ordered, "and open a channel to the Zoosh fleet." Lieutenant Vera Kim's fingers flew across the console. "No response, Captain. They're not answering." Carter's jaw tightened. "Keep trying." A Pathfinder sent transmission after transmission, but the Zoosh ships remained silent. Then, without warning, they fired. Green plasma bolts shot across space, slamming into the Pathfinder shields. The ship rocked violently, alarms blaring across the bridge. Sparks flew from control panels as engineers scrambled to stabilize the ship. "Shields at 60%, Kim shouted. That was a warning shot. Next time, they'll go for the kill. Carter gritted his teeth. This wasn't just aggression. This was an execution. "Return fire," he commanded. The Pathfinder's railguns roared, sending tungsten rounds straight at the nearest Zoosh ship. The rounds hit their mark, tearing through the enemy's hull. But something was wrong. The ship didn't react. No distress signals, no evasive maneuvers, just silence. Then something even stranger happened. The damaged ship began repairing itself. Metal reformed, glowing veins spreading across the hull like living tissue. The Zoosh ship regenerated before their eyes. "What the hell is that?" Carter muttered. Before anyone could answer, a new signal flashed on the screen. The Pathfinder sensors had detected something. A transmission. Not a message. A signal. It was pulsing across all Zoosh ships, a strange frequency that human technology barely understood. And deep in the garbled code, one word repeated over and over. "Obey." A terrifying discovery. Lieutenant Kim's face went pale. "Sir, this isn't a normal fleet. Something else is controlling them." Carter clenched his fists. He thought back to the lone survivor they had rescued, Engineer Darrell Ross. Their eyes were dark, like they weren't even alive anymore. Carter's gut twisted. The Zoosh hadn't turned against humanity of their own free will. Something had taken them. Something was using them. But there was no time to process the horror. The Zoosh warships charged again. "Evasive maneuvers," Carter yelled. The Pathfinder dodged a barrage of plasma fire, weaving through the battlefield. It was one ship against an entire fleet. They couldn't win this fight. "Set course for the nearest jump gate," Carter ordered. "We have to warn the Republic." The Pathfinder's engines flared, pushing the ship toward the distant jump gate, a portal that could take them back to human-controlled space. But the Zoosh weren't going to let them leave. Two enemy ships broke formation, moving to cut them off. "Brace for impact," Kim shouted. The Pathfinder fired its thrusters, barely slipping between them. The ship shook violently as plasma fire grazed the hull. Damage reports flooded in. Then, a direct hit. An explosion rocked the ship. The Pathfinder spun out of control, its engines sputtering. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge. "We're losing power," the chief engineer reported. "Jump drive offline. Repairing, but it'll take time." Carter gritted his teeth. They didn't have time. The Zeus ships circled like vultures, weapons primed for the killing blow. Then something unexpected happened. One of the Zeus ships hesitated. It wavered, as if resisting. For a split second, Carter saw its bridge through the viewport. A Zeus pilot sat there, his body rigid, his mandibles clenched tight. But his eyes, they flickered. For the briefest moment, they weren't empty. They weren't lifeless. They were afraid. And then, just as quickly as it came, the moment was gone. The pilot stiffened, his eyes darkening once more. The ship realigned with the others, its weapons charging. Carter felt his stomach sink. Whatever had enslaved the Zeus, they were still in there. A desperate escape. "Jump drive at 30%. The chief engineer called out. Carter knew they wouldn't survive another direct hit. They had to buy time. "Fire everything we have at that lead ship," he ordered. The Pathfinder's guns unleashed hell. Railgun slugs, missile salvos, laser bursts. The lead Zeus ship took the full force of the assault. It held for a moment, then exploded. They were gone. The Zeus fleet, the battlefield, the terrifying mystery behind their change, all left behind. But Carter knew the truth now. The Zeus weren't enemies. They were prisoners. Something had taken them. And now, humanity was next. The truth hidden in shadows. The TSV Pathfinder hurtled through the jump gate, emerging into the safety of Terran-controlled space. Alarms still blared throughout the ship, sparks rained from damaged consoles, and the crew struggled to regain control. "Report," Captain Elias Carter barked. "Shields are down, engines damaged. But we're alive," Lieutenant Vera Kim said, exhaling sharply. "Jump drive needs repairs before we can move again." Carter leaned back in his chair, relief washing over him. They had barely escaped. But the real problem wasn't their damaged ship. It was what they had learned. Something had taken control of the Zeus. Something powerful. And if humanity didn't act fast, they could be next. Terran Command reacts. Hours later, the Pathfinder limped into Station Avalon, a massive orbital base near the Terran Republic's core systems. Carter and his officers were rushed into a high-security debriefing room, where Admiral Jonathan Reed, one of the Republic's top military leaders, waited with a grim expression. "You're telling me," Reed said, rubbing his temples, "that the Zeus have completely changed, that they just started killing without reason?" Carter nodded. "It wasn't them, Admiral. They weren't in control." The room fell silent. Carter took a deep breath. They moved like a hive. No independent action. No tactics. Just blind aggression. And then there was the transmission. Transmission. Reed's eyes narrowed. Lieutenant Kim pulled up the recovered data. "We intercepted a repeating signal coming from their ships. A single word. Obey." Reed and the other officers exchanged looks. "We've been hearing strange reports," Reed admitted. "Trade routes disrupted. Outposts going dark near Zeus space. We thought it was political unrest." He clenched his fists. "We were wrong." Carter leaned forward. "Sir, I believe something is controlling them. Something unnatural." Reed exhaled slowly. "We need answers. And fast." The hidden records. Terran intelligence was already working on it. The Republic had decades of history with the Zeus, and deep within classified records, analysts found an anomaly. An old Zeus distress signal, dated 15 years ago. It had been weak, scrambled, and dismissed as an error at the time. But now it looked different. The message translated to a chilling phrase. "Something is here. We cannot stop it. We must OBI. The officers in the room exchanged uneasy glances. This happened years ago, Carter asked. Reed nodded, and we ignored it. The ghost colony. Further research revealed something even more disturbing. A Zhush colony world, Neraxis 4, had suddenly gone dark around the same time the distress signal was sent. No one knew why. No survivors, no escape ships, no records. It was as if the entire planet had been erased. And now, Zhush-controlled ships were attacking anyone who got close. Carter's stomach tightened. Sir, we need to go there. Reed gave him a sharp look. You just barely escaped with your life. You want to go back. If we don't, Carter said firmly, we'll never learn what really happened to them. Reed sighed. He knew Carter was right. If they didn't figure this out now, it could be humanity's fate next. Preparing for the mission. A new task force was assembled, the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Unlike the Pathfinder, this force would be ready for war. 3 battle cruisers for firepower, 2 stealth corvettes for recon, a science vessel for deep analysis, a special operations team for ground missions. Carter was given command of the TSV Valiant, a state-of-the-art warship designed for deep space combat. His orders were simple. Go to Neraxis 4, find out what happened, and, if possible, bring the Zhush back. But deep down, Carter feared the truth. What if the Zhush were already lost? And worse, what if whatever took them was already spreading? Humanity prepares for war. The 3rd Terran Expeditionary Fleet was a force built for war. 3 battle cruisers, 2 stealth corvettes, and a science vessel now stood ready to uncover the truth behind the Zhush's fall. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of his new ship, the TSV Valiant, staring at the fleet outside the viewport. He had fought many battles before, but this mission was different. This wasn't just about fighting an enemy. This was about saving an old friend. And if the Zhush couldn't be saved, then humanity would have no choice but to destroy them. The fleet sets out. As the fleet prepared for departure, Carter called his senior officers for a final briefing. We have one goal, he said, his voice firm. Find out what happened to the Zhush, and if we find a way to break whatever's controlling them, we take it. The officers nodded. Everyone knew the stakes. What if there's no way to save them? Lieutenant Vera Kim asked. Carter hesitated. Then we stop them before they come for us. The room was silent. No one wanted to be the first to say it, but they all knew. If the Zhush couldn't be freed, then humanity would have to wipe them out. The final warning. Just before departure, a last-minute message came from Zhush space. It was garbled, barely readable, but one phrase stood out clearly. Stay away. The hive sees all. It was a warning, but Carter knew they had no choice. With engines roaring, the fleet jumped to Neraxis 4. Arrival at a graveyard. When the fleet exited hyperspace, the planet lay before them. Neraxis 4 had once been a thriving Zhush colony. Now it was dead. The planet's surface was covered in darkness, with no signs of life. The cities were intact, but nothing moved. No lights, no transmissions, just silence. Then the sensors picked up movement. Sir, Kim said, staring at the display. We have ships. Hundreds of Zhush warships emerged from the darkness. They had been waiting. Carter clenched his fists. Battle stations. The first strike. The Zhush fleet moved in perfect synchronization. No fear, no hesitation. Like puppets on strings. Terran warships opened fire. Railguns tore through enemy hulls. Missiles exploded in blinding flashes. But for every Zhush ship destroyed, more took its place. And then, the enemy did something terrifying. Their destroyed ships reassembled. Twisted metal fused back together. Glowing veins ran through their hulls, pulsing like something alive. One of the officers whispered in horror, "They're regenerating." Carter's mind raced. If they couldn't be destroyed by normal means, Then humanity was in serious trouble. The infiltration plan. The battle was turning. The Zhush were adapting. If the fleet didn't act fast, they would be overwhelmed. Carter made a bold decision. "We need to get a team down to the surface," he said. "Find the source of this infection and destroy it." It was a suicide mission. But if they didn't stop this now, humanity would be next. As his officers exchanged nervous glances, Carter only had one thought. Whatever had taken the Zhush, it was waiting for them. The betrayal revealed. The TSV Valiant fired its thrusters, moving through the battlefield as the Terran fleet held the line against the Zhush armada. Explosions lit up space, railgun slugs and plasma fire streaking between warships. But no matter how many enemy ships they destroyed, they kept coming back. Regenerating, adapting, learning. Captain Elias Carter stood at the airlock, suited up for the most dangerous mission of his life. His strike team, elite Marines, engineers and scientists, was ready. Their objective was clear. Land on Neuraxis 4. Find the source of the Zhush corruption. Destroy it. And if they failed, then humanity would burn next. The descent into darkness. The team boarded a stealth dropship, slipping past the Zhush fleet unnoticed. The moment they entered the planet's atmosphere, they saw the horror with their own eyes. Neuraxis 4 was dead. Once great Zhush cities were now covered in an unnatural black growth, like pulsing veins of living metal. Towers stood hollow, their glass shattered, their walls crawling with something alive. "We're not alone," whispered Sergeant Hayes, gripping his rifle. Carter saw movement in the ruins below. Zhush civilians, or at least they used to be. Their bodies were twisted, infested. Glowing veins ran through their exoskeletons, their eyes dark pits of nothingness. Some of them simply stood there, unmoving, staring at the sky as if waiting for orders. Others twitched violently, their limbs convulsing like puppets. Then one of them snapped its head toward the ship. Carter's blood ran cold. "They see us. Get ready for a fight." The hive revealed. The dropship landed in the ruins, and the team moved fast. Weapons up. Formation tight. Their target was an underground facility, an old Zhush research lab that had gone silent years ago. If there were any answers, they were down there. As they reached the entrance, Carter's comm buzzed. It was the fleet. "Captain," came Admiral Reed's urgent voice. "We intercepted another transmission. It's not Zhush." Carter frowned. "Then who is it?" A pause. Then Reed said two words that sent a chill through his bones. "It's human." The betrayal. The strike team entered the underground lab, moving through silent, dark corridors. Strange biotech growths pulsed along the walls, spreading like an infection. And then they found it. A human research station. Carter stepped forward, his stomach twisting. Computers, old Terran insignias, notes written in English. This wasn't a Zhush facility. It was Terran. The logs told a horrifying story. 15 years ago, Terran scientists had experimented on a Zhush colony. They had found something in deep space, a living eye, a parasite, a mind unlike anything before. Instead of destroying it, they studied it. They tested it on Zhush subjects, believing they could control it. But the experiment went wrong. The entity took over. It turned the Zhush into puppets. It spread, hijacking minds, rewriting biology. The Terran scientists tried to shut it down. They failed. And then, in a desperate act, they erased all records and abandoned Neuraxis 4. The Republic had known, and they had left the Zhush to die. The hive speaks. Suddenly, the walls trembled. A deep, echoing voice filled the air. "You are too late, Captain Carter." The team spun around, weapons raised. But there was no enemy in sight. The voice was everywhere. "We were born from your mistakes. We learned from your people." And now, the darkness shifted. The walls moved. From the shadows, A massive figure emerged. A Zeush, larger than any Carter had seen, its exoskeleton blackened, veins of glowing energy pulsing through its body. But its face was human. Or at least, it had once been. Carter's heart pounded. One of the original scientists, twisted, changed. The voice, the hive mind, spoke again. Your republic abandoned us, but we did not die. We evolved. And now, Captain, you will join us. The betrayal revealed, continued. The room was cold, damp, and alive. Captain Elias Carter's breath came slow and steady as he stared at the twisted figure standing before him. It had once been human. Now it was something else. Its body had been fused with Zeush exoskeleton, dark veins of pulsing, living metal weaving through its form like circuits in a machine. Its eyes, one human, one insectoid, glowed with eerie intelligence. And its voice, deep, smooth, inhuman, was everywhere. Your people created me, Captain. Carter's grip on his rifle tightened. His team spread out, weapons raised. But no one fired. Not yet. He kept his voice firm. Who are you? The creature took a slow, deliberate step forward. I am the hive. The words echoed inside Carter's skull as much as in the air. The truth comes out. Carter's mind raced. The logs, the abandoned lab, the transmissions they intercepted, it all made sense now. 15 years ago, Terran scientists experimented on a living AI parasite. They believed they could harness it, control it. They were wrong. The parasite assimilated the Zeush, spreading through their minds like a virus. It rewrote their biology, fusing flesh with machine. It learned. It evolved. And then it took the scientists too. You were one of them, Carter said, his voice low. One of the researchers. Before you, changed. The hive tilted its head, a slow, unnatural motion. I was the first. His human eye flickered, as if some part of him remembered. I resisted. I fought. But in the end, I saw the truth. We are not meant to be separate. We are meant to be one. Carter clenched his jaw. Mind control. Total assimilation. That was what had happened to the Zeush. They hadn't betrayed humanity. They had been consumed. The horrifying offer. The hive lifted one chitinous, metal-infused hand and spread its fingers. Join us, Captain. A chill ran down Carter's spine. His team tensed. No one spoke. The hive's voice softened, almost inviting. You fear us, but we are beyond war, beyond suffering. We are unity. The walls pulsed. The shadows moved. The air was thick with something unseen crawling into their minds. You do not have to fight. You do not have to die. You only have to surrender. Carter's thoughts turned sluggish. His limbs felt heavy. He saw his crew lowering their weapons. No, 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 no. He clenched his fists, forced his mind to focus. This was the hive. This was how they spread. Not just through technology, not just through biology, through control, through thought. Resist, Carter shouted, shaking off the haze. His voice snapped his team back to reality. They stumbled, blinking as if waking from a dream. The hive laughed. The battle begins. Fall back, Carter ordered. The hive's voice turned cold. You refuse unity. That is unfortunate. The walls erupted. Blackened Zeush warriors, their bodies fused with pulsing cybernetics, crawled from the shadows. Their eyes were lifeless voids, their bodies twitching unnaturally. Then they attacked. Carter and his team opened fire. Plasma bolts and railgun rounds tore through the Zeush, but they didn't fall like normal soldiers. Their wounds closed. Their bodies healed. They kept coming. Carter grabbed a grenade and hurled it. Boom. The explosion sent shockwaves through the lab, collapsing part of the ceiling. Dust and debris rained down, forcing the enemy back. But not for long. We need to get out of here. Kim shouted. Carter's mind raced. They couldn't win. Not here. Not now. But they could still finish the mission. The escape plan. He looked at the main console in the lab, the heart of the Hive's network. If they could destroy it, they could cripple the infection. Cover me. Carter sprinted to the terminal, dodging fire. His hands flew over the controls, bypassing layers of Zhush encryption. Access D&ID. The Hive's voice echoed again. You cannot stop us, Captain. But Carter wasn't trying to stop the Hive. He was trying to send a message. The final warning. A distress signal burst from the terminal, beaming out into space, straight to the Terran fleet. Admiral Reed received it instantly. Live footage from the lab. The Hive. The infected Zhush. The truth about what humanity had done. The Republic couldn't deny it anymore. They had created this nightmare. But now, they had a chance to end it. The cost of freedom. Carter's team fought their way back to the surface, barely reaching their dropship as the Zhush swarmed. The ship lifted off in a hail of enemy fire. And above them, the Terran fleet opened fire. Missiles, railguns, orbital strikes. The skies burned. The Hive screamed. Carter barely made it back to the TSV Valiant before Neuraxis 4 was erased from existence. The aftermath. The mission was over. The Zhush homeworld was gone. The Hive had been destroyed, for now. But as Carter stood on the bridge, watching the fires fade in the distance, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. Because in the ruins of Neuraxis 4, deep beneath the destruction, something still pulsed. Something still lived. And in the dark, a single final transmission echoed across the void. We are not gone. We are patient. And we are coming. The reckoning. Humanity strikes back. The fires of Neuraxis 4 still burned behind them. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the TSV Valiant, watching as the last remnants of the Zhush homeworld crumbled. The Terran fleet had done what was necessary. They had erased the Hive's stronghold from existence. But deep in his gut, Carter knew they hadn't won. Because the Hive's final transmission still echoed in his mind. We are not gone. We are patient. And we are coming. The aftermath of destruction. The bridge was quiet, save for the distant hum of ship systems. Admiral Reed's voice finally broke the silence over the comms. Carter, what the hell just happened down there? Carter exhaled. We destroyed their world, sir. But the Hive, it's still out there. Reed cursed under his breath. Are you telling me we just wiped out an entire species for nothing? Carter clenched his fists. The Zhush weren't the enemy. They had been victims, enslaved by a nightmare humanity had created. And now, the Hive knew the truth. The Hive knew where to strike next. The Hive's next move. Suddenly, alarms blared across the Valiant. Long-range sensors had detected something. Lieutenant Kim paled as she read the incoming data. Sir, we have incoming ships. Carter's stomach twisted. How many? She swallowed hard. Hundreds. The bridge fell into stunned silence. Then Kim's voice came again, even shakier than before. Sir, they're not Zhush. Carter froze. What? She turned to face him. They're human ships. The Hive has spread. Carter felt his blood turn to ice. The Hive had infected the Zhush first. But Neuraxis 4 had been their testing ground, their first experiment. And now, they had taken humans. The fleet was already mobilizing for battle. Admiral Reed's voice was sharp over the comms. All ships, battle stations, we cannot let them reach Terran space. Carter knew this was no longer just a war for survival. This was a war for the soul of humanity itself. The first strike. The infected human fleet did not send a message. They simply attacked. Terran warships fired first. Railgun rounds tore into the enemy's hulls. Missiles detonated in fiery explosions. But the Hive-adapted ships healed, just like the Zhush before them. They were evolving, learning. And then, for the first time, the hive spoke to all of them. Across every ship, through every comm system, one voice echoed. "You thought you could erase us." The words crawled into their minds, deep and suffocating. "You thought you could burn us away, but we are already inside you." Carter's heart pounded. He looked at his crew. Some of them were frozen, staring blankly at the screens, breathing slow, eyes flickering with something wrong. "We need to shut off external comms," Carter shouted. Kim didn't hesitate. She severed the ship's network link. Instantly, the affected crew members collapsed, gasping for breath. The hive wasn't just controlling ships. It was infecting minds. The reckoning begins. The battle raged outside, but Carter knew this wasn't a war they could win through sheer firepower. The hive was too fast, too smart. Humanity needed a new weapon, a way to fight the hive at its core. And there was only one place where they might find it. Buried deep in classified Terran Republic records was the location of the first hive experiment, the place where humanity first found the parasite. If there was any way to stop the hive, it was there. But to get there, they would have to survive this battle first. Carter turned to his crew, fire burning in his eyes. "We end this, here and now." The fight for humanity's survival had only just begun. The journey that followed, the battle was chaos. Terran warships clashed against the infected fleet, firing everything they had. Railguns tore through enemy hulls, missile barrages lit up the void, and laser fire sliced through the darkness. But the hive-adapted ships would not die. For every destroyed vessel, another reformed, its metal twisting, repairing, growing. The infected pilots felt no fear, no hesitation. They were not human anymore. And Captain Elias Carter knew the truth. They had already lost this battle. The only way out. On the TSV Valiant, alarms blared as the ship rocked from a near miss. The shields were failing, weapons were overheating, and the fleet was being overrun. Admiral Reed's voice came through the comms, filled with static. "Carter, the hive, it's spreading through our comms. We can't hold the line." Carter clenched his jaw. He had already seen crew members freeze, twitch, whisper words that were not their own. The hive wasn't just fighting them, it was infecting them. "We have to leave," Carter said. "Now." "But sir, the battle," Lieutenant Kim started. "If we stay, we all die," Carter snapped. "Or worse, we become them." Kim swallowed hard, but she nodded. The Republic was losing this battle, but if there was even a chance to stop the hive at its source, they had to find it. A desperate escape. Carter turned to his helmsman. Plata jumped to the coordinates from the classified records. The hive's origin. The Valiant's engines roared, powering up for a blind hyperspace jump. As they prepared to escape, the hive's voice echoed one last time. "Run if you wish. Hide if you must. But we are already inside you. You cannot stop what has begun." Carter ignored it. He focused on one thing. One hope. Finding where the hive had started. And ending it. For good. The jump drive engaged. The Valiant and its remaining escort ships vanished into hyperspace. The journey ahead. The crew was silent as they watched the stars blur. Some of them stared at their hands, as if wondering if they were already infected. Others simply prayed. Carter stood at the helm, fists clenched. This wasn't just about war anymore. It was about saving humanity before there was nothing left to save. Ahead of them lay the place where the hive was born. The last chance to end this nightmare. And Carter knew, without a doubt, the hive would be waiting for them.